The underground poker room was a cathedral of smoke and shadow. Cigar smoke hung thick as fog, catching the amber light and turning it into something almost beautiful. Green felt tables stretched across the space like altars to greed. Crystal glasses sweated on mahogany stands. Velvet chairs worth more than a year of an ordinary person's rent surrounded each table. But none of that mattered now. Giovanni Valenti knelt on the expensive carpet. His hands trembled. Those hands had built an empire that stretched through Boston's underground like a spider's web. Those hands had signed documents that ended lives. Those hands had executed his own brother for betrayal, and he had not blinked. He had not cried. He had remained stone. Now those hands were completely useless. Emma lay on the poker table. Age 6. Her small chest barely rose and fell. The color was draining from her lips like ink from wet paper. Cordelia Blackwood screamed. She screamed and screamed and screamed, but her screams changed nothing. The doctors froze with equipment in their hands like men carved from ice. Sergio and Luca, Giovanni's most trusted lieutenants, stood paralyzed against the far wall. They had watched their boss order executions without flinching. They had never seen him afraid. This was fear. Then the crowd parted. Aria Reynolds pushed through the wall of expensive suits and gold watches. She wore a stained nanny uniform. Her shoes had holes in the soles. Her hair was pulled back with a rubber band that had snapped twice and been retied. She made $11 an hour. She moved to the poker table with steady hands while everyone else remained frozen. She lifted Emma's small body. She tilted the child's head back with a gentleness that seemed impossible in that room full of violence and power. She sealed her mouth over the child's mouth and breathed. Once. Twice. 3 times. Giovanni Valenti watched this woman with nothing command his entire world. His security team did not move. His doctors did not interrupt. Even the cigar smoke seemed to pause in the air. She breathed into Emma like she was breathing life itself into the child. Like her own breath could rewrite what was happening on that poker table. Emma gasped. Her eyes opened. The room exhaled. But what Giovanni Valenti did not know in that moment, what he could not possibly have known, was that this was not their first meeting. 6 months earlier, on a highway that cut through the cold October night like a blade, this same woman had offered him something no one in his entire empire had ever given him. She had offered him kindness when he was a stranger. She had shared her broken umbrella. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Let us return to the moment when everything was still falling apart. Let us travel back to Route 128, to a night when Aria Reynolds had exactly $5 in her pocket and her entire world was collapsing into mathematical certainty. The sedan sputtered. It coughed like a dying animal and then went silent. Aria sat in the driver's seat with her hands gripping the steering wheel. The engine ticked as it cooled. October wind rattled the windows. The cold cut through the car like a blade wrapped in ice, and she pulled her thin coat tighter around her body. $5. That was all she had left. She turned on the interior light and counted the crumpled bills again, as if the number might change. As if mathematics might decide to show her mercy. $1. Another $1. 3 more worn bills, their edges soft from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. $5. The foreclosure notice lay on the passenger seat. The paper was creased from being picked up and put down repeatedly over the past week. The words were simple. They did not need to be complicated. $35,000. 3 days. After that, the house was gone. Her phone battery was at 3%. She had been using the glow from the screen to count the money in the darkness. The road was empty. Not a single car had passed in the last hour. Just wind and darkness and the ticking of a cooling engine. She had worked 14-hour days at the Blackwood estate. Cleaning the marble floors of rooms nobody used. Cooking meals nobody tasted properly. Caring for Emma, who was the only good thing in that house, the only reason Aria had not walked away. Cordelia Blackwood had paid her $800 a month. For 14-hour days, that was less than $2 an hour. But Aria had not left because Emma needed her. Because Emma was 4 years old and flinched when her mother raised her voice. Because Emma looked at Aria like she was the only safe thing in her world. Then there was Douglas Hale, the hotel manager from her second job. He took the tips customers left on the counter. He took them every single day. When she asked him why, he smiled in a way that made her skin crawl. He said it was the restaurant's policy. He said if she had a problem with it, he could hire someone else. Someone more grateful for the opportunity. Last week, he had backed her into the kitchen walk-in freezer. His hand had found her waist. His breath smelled like cheap cologne and the burger he had eaten for lunch. He said, "You could make a lot more money if you were nice to me." Really nice. She had stepped on his foot and walked out. He had called her on the phone that night. His voice was different then. Not seductive. Cold. He said, "You should be very careful about your next choice, Aria. Jobs like yours are easy to lose." Aria had hung up. She had not gone back. That was 2 weeks ago. The last paycheck she had received from the Blackwood estate was her final one. Cordelia had reduced her hours because Emma was starting kindergarten. The hotel had not sent her final check. Douglas was making sure of that. $5. The wind picked up. The car rocked slightly. Aria pulled her coat tighter and watched her breath fog the windshield. She was 31 years old but looked older. Her hands were calloused from scrubbing. Her back ached from bending. Her eyes had a hollowness that came from counting pennies for so long that numbers had stopped meaning anything. There was a single photograph taped to the dashboard. Emma at age 3, holding a cup of hot chocolate and smiling at the camera. The photograph was bent at one corner from being touched so many times. Aria reached up and straightened it. A light appeared in the distance. Not a car light. Something else. Something that grew brighter as it approached. Then another light beside it. Then another. The road ahead was suddenly illuminated in a way that made Aria's chest tighten. A convoy of black SUVs emerged from the darkness like something from a nightmare. There were at least 5 vehicles. They were massive, their windows tinted so dark you could not see inside. They moved slowly down the highway, their headlights cutting through the October night. They looked like something that had rolled out of a different world entirely, a world where money was absolute and power was visible. The lead vehicle slowed as it approached her sedan. Aria's hand moved to the door lock. The SUV pulled in behind her. Then the doors opened. Men stepped out. Tall men in suits that cost more than everything she owned. Men with the bearing of people who had never had to ask for what they wanted. Men whose eyes scanned the empty highway with the calculation of predators. Aria watched in the rearview mirror as one of the men stepped forward. He was taller than the others. His suit was charcoal gray. His coat was cashmere, the kind you only saw in magazine photographs. His hair was dark, slicked back from his forehead. And his face was beautiful and terrible at the same time, carved from marble and shadow. He approached the driver's side of her sedan. Aria's breath caught in her throat. The window was already down. The broken mechanism had been broken for 3 months, and she could not afford to fix it. Giovanni Valenti looked down at her. His eyes were dark and penetrating, the color of storm clouds. A scar ran from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, pale against his olive skin. He did not smile. "Your car," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. "It is not running." It was not a question. Aria's voice came out smaller than she intended. The engine gave up. "Yes," he said. He was quiet for a moment, studying her. "It has given up entirely." The wind picked up again. A plastic bag blew across the highway. The October cold was relentless, a living thing that seemed to want to drain the warmth from every living being on that road. Aria was shaking. not entirely from the cold. "We are going to Boston," Giovanni said. "We will give you a ride." It was not an offer. It was a statement of fact, delivered in a tone that suggested the universe would rearrange itself to make it happen. "I don't need," Aria started. "Your car is not running," he repeated. "The temperature will drop below freezing in the next 2 hours. You are wearing a coat that would not keep a child warm. And you are alone on a highway where nobody else has driven in 40 minutes. He paused. His dark eyes held hers. "You need a ride," he said. "Whether you believe it or not." Aria looked at the 5 men standing in the darkness. She looked at the massive SUVs with their tinted windows and their suggestion of unlimited resources. She looked at this man who kneeled beside her broken car like he was kneeling beside a wounded animal. She should have been afraid. Instead, she opened the car door. She got out slowly, and as she did, the wind lifted her thin coat. The ocean was somewhere in the distance, pushing cold air inland. The October wind was the kind that cut through fabric like scissors through paper. Giovanni removed his coat. He draped it across her shoulders. Aria tried to refuse. Her hands came up. She tried to push the cashmere away. It felt like trying to push away the sky. "I am not cold," Giovanni said. His voice was like venom, like a threat, like the most genteel dismissal of mortality she had ever heard. "Take the coat. Before we continue, I need to ask you something. If you were standing alone on that empty highway with $5 in your pocket and a foreclosure notice sitting on your passenger seat, and a powerful stranger offered you help, would you take it? Would you trust it? Or would you assume that nothing in this world was ever free? Drop a like if you are still with us. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you never miss what happens next. Because what comes next will change everything. Now let us continue. Let us see what happens when Giovanni Valenti drives Aria Reynolds toward Boston. The highway stretched behind them like a scar that would not heal. Giovanni Valenti sat in the back of the black SUV, his white shirt stained crimson, his breathing shallow and controlled. Sergio drove with both hands steady on the wheel while Luca sat in the passenger seat, one hand pressed to his own wound, a graze across his ribs from the warehouse in Saudi. Neither man spoke. The only sound was the engine's growl and the occasional rasp of Giovanni's breathing. 20 minutes earlier, his own brother had put a knife in his side. Family loyalty, the sacred code that had held the Valenti empire together for 3 generations, had shattered like dropped glass. Marco, his younger brother, the one he had raised, protected, elevated, had sold them all to enemies for money and the promise of power he would never truly possess. Giovanni had not hesitated. He never hesitated. The knife came out. His brother fell. And now the empire teetered on the edge of chaos. The pain in his side was a blade wrapped in ice, constant and unforgiving. He pressed his hand against the wound and felt warm blood seeping through his fingers. Sergio had wanted to drive to the private hospital in the North End, the one owned by a doctor who owed Giovanni everything. Giovanni had refused. His men needed to see him move, to see him act, to see that his authority remained absolute even as blood soaked through Italian silk. Route 128, Giovanni said, his voice like venom, like the hiss of a snake coiled in darkness. "Take it north." "Boss, the hospital," Luca began. Route 128. The SUV turned onto the highway. The October night pressed against the windows with the weight of winter coming, the kind of cold that found every gap in clothing, every weakness in the human body. Sergio drove past empty exits and shuttered rest stops. The highway at this hour belonged to nobody, no late-night travelers, no state police, just the endless ribbon of asphalt and the darkness beyond the reach of headlights. It was at mile marker 47 that Giovanni saw her. A sedan, pale blue and ancient, sat motionless on the shoulder with its emergency lights flashing. The lights blinked like a heartbeat slowly dying. As the convoy approached, Sergio's hand moved toward the radio, protocol when any obstacle appeared on the road, but Giovanni raised one finger and the radio stayed silent. "Pull over," Giovanni said. "Boss? Pull over." The SUV slowed. Through the rear window, Giovanni could see a figure inside the sedan. Small. Alone. The silhouette of someone sitting in the driver's seat, shoulders hunched against the cold that was pouring through every gap in the dying vehicle. Sergio maneuvered the lead SUV onto the shoulder, 50 feet ahead of the sedan. The headlights illuminated the road in a pale cone. Behind them, the other vehicles arranged themselves in a perimeter. This was protocol too: always secure the space, always control the environment, always prepare for threat from any direction. Giovanni opened his door and the October wind cut across the highway like a blade through paper. He stepped out slowly, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. The cold found the wound immediately, and for a moment the pain sharpened into something almost crystalline. His men emerged from the vehicles in synchronized silence. Sergio and Luca moved toward the sedan first, hands visible and unthreatening. They had been through this before. Civilian contact required specific protocols. But Giovanni raised his other hand and they stopped. He walked to the sedan himself. The woman inside looked up as his shadow fell across the window. She was young, perhaps early 30s, but with something ancient in her eyes. Dark hair pulled back severely. Thin face. Hands that gripped the steering wheel with the intensity of someone clinging to the last solid thing in a drowning world. Her breath was visible in the interior cold. Giovanni leaned down. She rolled the window down halfway. "Engine won't turn over," she said. Her voice was steady despite the cold, despite sitting alone on an empty highway at night with 5 black SUVs surrounding her. "I've been waiting for a tow truck for an hour. They said maybe another hour, but the temperature's dropping and I need to get to Boston." Giovanni looked at her hands. Calloused. The nails were short and practical. Beneath the steering wheel he could see worn work shoes with holes in the soles. Her coat was the kind purchased at a discount store 10 years ago and never replaced. Everything about this woman announced poverty like a confession. "What is your name?" Giovanni asked. "Aria," she said. "Aria Reynolds." He had not asked what he intended to ask. The question came from somewhere outside his control, from the part of him that had been walking wounded through a highway darkness a moment before. "Do you have family in Boston?" "A job," Aria said. "Nanny position. I start tomorrow morning at 6. She paused. "I can't lose this job." Giovanni nodded once. He stood and turned toward his convoy. Sergio was already moving, already making calculations about logistics and security and whether this was some kind of trap, and it might have been. The world was like that, but Giovanni's instinct had never failed him, and his instinct said this woman in the broken car was exactly what she appeared to be. Desperate and alone. "We will take you," Giovanni said. Aria's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "That's not necessary. I'll wait for the tow." "The tow truck will not come," Giovanni said. His tone was not cruel, merely factual. The way one speaks about inevitability. "It is a Thursday night in October. They have 17 calls ahead of you and no incentive to prioritize a car worth less than $500. You will sit here alone on a highway where nobody else has driven in 40 minutes. He paused. His dark eyes held hers through the half-open window. "You need a ride. Whether you believe it or not." Aria looked at the 5 men standing in the darkness. She looked at the massive SUVs with their tinted windows and their suggestion of unlimited resources. She looked at this man who leaned toward her broken car like he was bending toward a wounded animal. She should have been afraid. Instead, she opened the car door. She got out slowly, and as she did, the wind lifted her thin coat. The ocean was somewhere in the distance, pushing cold air inland. The October wind was the kind that cut through fabric like scissors through paper. Giovanni removed his cashmere coat, Italian wool, worth more than 3 months of her salary, and draped it across her shoulders. "I am not cold," he said. His voice was like venom, like a threat, like the most genteel dismissal of mercy she had ever heard. "Take the coat." Aria reached for the coat's hem as though to return it, but the moment she felt the weight of it, the warmth, something inside her gave way. Not completely, but enough. She pulled it tighter around herself and walked toward the lead SUV where Luca held the passenger door open. As she climbed inside, Aria felt something shift beneath her foot. She looked down. In the darkness between the seat and the door frame, something small and white caught the light. She reached down and pulled out a photograph, creased and faded. In the photo, a woman and a small child stood in sunlight. The woman was smiling in the way people smile when they have forgotten that smiling is supposed to hurt. Before she could ask, Luca closed the door and the convoy began moving north toward Boston. In the back seat, Giovanni pressed his hand harder against his bleeding wound and told himself that stopping for a stranger on an empty highway was a moment of weakness, nothing more. A moment his men would forget by morning. A moment that meant nothing. But he did not forget the way she had stood in the cold without flinching. He did not forget her hands on that steering wheel, gripping it like it was the only thing keeping her from falling into darkness. And he did not know, not yet, that this woman in a borrowed coat, sitting in the front seat of a black SUV, would become the one thing his empire could not protect and his authority could not command. The highway unspooled behind them. Ahead, the lights of Boston rose against the black sky like a city built on promises nobody intended to keep. The hospital room hummed with machines that cost more than Aria Reynolds had earned in a lifetime. Emma lay motionless beneath white sheets, monitors tracing the fragile rhythm of her 9-year-old heart across screens that blinked in the darkness. Aria had not left the bedside in 32 hours. She had not eaten. She had not slept properly. Her hand remained locked around Emma's small fingers, as though letting go might mean the child would slip away into whatever dark place seizures came from. The nurses whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. The mother hasn't visited once. Pediatric ICU on the 3rd floor of St. Mary's Hospital. October drifting toward November. A foreclosure note is sitting on Aria's kitchen table at home with a deadline that was now tomorrow. The footsteps came at 11:06 in the evening. Measured. Unhurried. The kind of footsteps that made people move out of the way without being asked. Aria's eyes opened to find Giovanni Valenti standing in the doorway of Emma's room, framed in the fluorescent hallway light, with Sergio and Luca flanking him in black suits that probably cost more than Aria's entire wardrobe. His left side bore a fresh white bandage beneath his open shirt. The wound from Route 128. She sat up, confused. You? Giovanni nodded. He was taller than she remembered. Broader. The kind of man who took up space simply by existing. Dark eyes. Scar running from cheekbone to jaw like a blade had once tried to rewrite his face. Gold watch catching the overhead lights. Everything about him spoke of dangerous money. Me, he said simply. He pulled a chair beside hers and sat down. The gesture was so ordinary it seemed impossible. In the hallway, Luca exchanged a look with Sergio that said neither of them had ever seen their boss sit beside anyone like this. Not in the way he was sitting beside this woman in a borrowed coat, in a pediatric ward, holding vigil over a child that was not his. Why are you here? Aria's voice came out barely a whisper, shattered like glass. Giovanni looked at Emma's sleeping face. Because 6 months ago you helped a stranger on a highway during a dry October cold that cut like broken glass. Now I help you. He placed an envelope on the bedside table. Cream-colored. Heavy. The kind of envelope that contained more money than Aria had ever touched. The surgery. $47,000. And the foreclosure, $35,000. Consider it handled. Aria stared at the envelope. Her hand shook as she reached for it, then pushed it back. I can't accept this. Why would you help me? I'm nobody. Just a woman who happened to pass by when you needed help. Giovanni's voice deepened, like thunder rolling across a distant sky. You're the woman who offered a broken umbrella to a dying man without knowing who he was. Without expecting anything in return. That makes you somebody. He paused. The only somebody I've trusted in 15 years. Over the next 3 days, while Emma recovered and the machines beeped their steady affirmation of her healing heart, Aria learned pieces of Giovanni's story in the hospital cafeteria at 3 in the morning. Terrible coffee in styrofoam cups. The fluorescent lights making both of them look like ghosts. My brother was named Marco, Giovanni said, his hands trembling around the cup in a way that seemed impossible for someone so powerful. We built everything together. The poker rooms in the underground, the money laundering through the hotels, the protection racket that kept this city breathing in a certain direction. Then I found out he sold our family to the Castellano crew for $200,000 and a promise of territory he never earned. Aria listened without judgment. I had to choose, Giovanni continued. Mercy or survival? I chose survival. His eyes, hollow and burning, fixed on something beyond the cafeteria walls. I put 2 bullets in my own brother's chest in a warehouse on West Broadway. That was 3 weeks before you found me bleeding on Route 128. Aria reached across the table and placed her hand on his. Not romantic. Not yet. Just human. Just one person acknowledging that another person had carried something too heavy for too long. I lost a baby, Aria said quietly. I was 17. Homeless. I didn't even know I was pregnant until I went into labor in a shelter bathroom. The baby was born too early. Didn't survive. She paused. Her voice steadied. But I kept the shoes they gave me. Those tiny first shoes. I keep them in a box under my bed. Some days I think about throwing them away. Most days I can't. They were both survivors, she understood. Both people who had been remade by circumstances that should have destroyed them. What happened next came like thunder with no warning. 3 blocks away, at the Grand View Hotel where Aria had lost her second job, Douglas Hale was moving through the supply room with his phone in one hand and his confidence in the other. He didn't notice Luca standing in the hallway, recording every moment in sharp digital clarity. Douglas's voice dripped with entitlement as he spoke to his assistant. The money from the penthouse accounts gets split 3 ways. My cut, the Castellano crew's cut, and into my personal account. Don't write anything down. Don't tell anyone. If you do, I'll make sure you never work in this city again. Luca sent the video to Giovanni within minutes. At the Blackwood estate, Cordelia Blackwood sat in her mahogany-paneled study surrounded by the trappings of inherited wealth. Expensive paintings. A crystal decanter of scotch that cost more than Aria earned in a month. Cordelia wore Chanel-like armor. Her voice, when she spoke to Aria the morning Emma came home from the hospital, carried the kind of cruelty that only comes from a lifetime of never being told no. You're terminated, Cordelia said, not looking up from her phone. Emma has become too attached to you. It's inappropriate. A proper nurse will handle her care from now on. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave. Aria stood frozen. But her medications. Her follow-up appointments with cardiology. She needs consistency, structure. She needs someone from an appropriate background. Not some shelter girl playing house. Cordelia waved her hand dismissively, the gesture of someone swatting away an insect. Pack your closet and go. Aria left without arguing. She had learned long ago that arguing with people like Cordelia Blackwood only made things worse. But she had not learned, not yet, that Sergio was in the study photographing documents on Cordelia's desk. Charity fund transfers to offshore accounts. Embezzlement spread across 18 months. $200,000 that belonged to children's hospitals and cancer wards, diverted into accounts that existed nowhere on any official ledger. That night, Giovanni found Aria sitting on the porch steps of the small house she had saved from foreclosure. The dry October cold had deepened into November cold, and her breath came out in white clouds. She held a pair of tiny shoes in her lap, worn and faded, the kind of shoes that a 9-year-old baby might have worn for exactly 1 day before growing out of them. Or in this case, before never having a chance to grow at all. I lost both jobs today, Aria said without looking up. Giovanni sat beside her. His men waited in the black SUVs parked at the curb, patient and silent. You didn't lose anything. You're about to gain everything. I don't understand. You will. Giovanni's voice was quiet but certain. I need someone to manage the legitimate side of my operations. Real estate holdings. Community investments. Scholarship funds. Legitimate businesses that need a real person running them. Someone with integrity. Someone who understands what it means to build something from nothing. He paused. The city lights of Boston glowed in the distance, impossible and beautiful. $85,000 salary. Your own apartment. Your own life. No more closets. No more Douglas Hale. No more Cordelia Blackwood telling you to pack your things. Aria looked at him. Why me? You have hundreds of people who could do this. Everyone else wants something from me, Giovanni said. Power, money, protection, favors. You wanted nothing. You offered a broken umbrella to a dying stranger because you saw someone suffering and you moved. That's the person I need beside me. But what Aria did not know, as she sat there holding those tiny shoes and listening to Giovanni's voice like venom wrapped in velvet, was that the machinery of justice was already moving. FBI tips had been filed. Evidence packages had been delivered. Surveillance footage was being compiled. And within 72 hours, both Douglas Hale and Cordelia Blackwood would discover that there was a price for cruelty. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. Aria Reynolds sits in her kitchen on a Sunday morning that feels like the end of the world. Rain hammers the windows like fists demanding entry. November storms have replaced the dry October cold, and the kitchen is so cold she can see her breath. The foreclosure notice paid, the bank account empty, both jobs lost in a single week. She holds a pair of tiny baby shoes in her trembling hands. These shoes belong to a child she never knew. She found them in the shelter donation bin when she was 17 years old, alone, broken, with nothing in the world except a sleeping bag and the clothes on her back. She kept them for 8 years. Not because she hoped for children. Because they proved that someone, somewhere, had loved a baby enough to buy it shoes. That love existed. That she was not completely, utterly alone. She counts the money on her kitchen table. $12. $12 and a mother's wedding ring she could pawn. $12 and a phone number for a shelter bed. $12 between her and the streets. The rain intensifies. Water drips through a crack in the ceiling, landing on the linoleum with a rhythm like a ticking clock counting down to her disappearance. She thinks about calling the shelter. She thinks about how easy it would be to stop fighting, to surrender, to vanish into the city like so many others have. Her hands shake as she clutches the baby shoes. Her phone buzzes. A text from an unknown number. Emma asks about you every day. She drew you a picture. Giovanni. An attached photo shows a child's drawing in bright crayon colors. Emma, age 7, has sketched 2 figures holding hands in a hospital room. One figure wears a blue dress and has red hair. The other is taller, with dark hair, and is holding the smaller figure close. Both are smiling. The sky above them is yellow. The sun is enormous. Aria stares at that drawing for a long moment. Her breath catches. Her eyes blur. She sets down the baby shoes and covers her mouth with her hand. She texts back, "Tell her I miss her too." She does not know that at that exact moment, 12 men in black tactical gear are moving through the Grand View Hotel like ghosts moving through walls. Their footsteps are silent on the marble floors. Their voices are clipped, professional, controlled. The FBI raid on Douglas Hale happens at dawn on Monday. Agents flood through the hotel corridors, badges flashing, warrants echoing through marble lobbies. They move like a synchronized machine, each man knowing his role, each movement purposeful and precise. Douglas Hale is in his office on the 3rd floor, alone, counting stolen tips. $4,300 in cash spread across his desk in neat stacks. Money he stole from waitresses and dishwashers and housekeeping staff who could barely afford to eat. The door explodes inward. Douglas Hale, you are under arrest for theft, embezzlement, money laundering, and sexual harassment. The agent's voice is cold, official, delivered with the weight of the federal government behind every syllable. 14 charges are read aloud. 14 separate violations. 14 reasons his life is ending at this moment. Douglas tries to run. He knocks over his desk chair. Stacks of bills cascade to the floor like confetti at a funeral. He lunges for the window, thinking maybe, just maybe, he can somehow escape what is happening. The agents are faster. They tackle him to the ground. His face hits the marble floor. His nose breaks with a crack like a branch snapping. Blood spreads across the white stone. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know whose money I was skimming. Please, please, I didn't know. He begs. He weeps. He offers names of other criminals, other associates, anything to save himself. The agents ignore his pleas. They place handcuffs on his wrists. The metal is cold. The handcuffs are tight enough to cut off circulation. He is dragged out through the lobby while hotel staff watch in absolute silence. Porters, bellhops, maintenance workers, everyone he screamed at, everyone he threatened, everyone he made miserable, they all watch as he passes. Some of them do not look away. Some of them smile very slightly. News cameras catch every moment. Douglas Hale, the man who terrorized minimum wage workers and stole their tips and cornered women in storage closets, is reduced to a sobbing mess on every Boston news channel by noon. His orange jumpsuit is oversized. His nose is bandaged. His eyes are hollow with the realization that his life has ended. The mugshot is distributed to 700 news outlets. By evening, every major network in Massachusetts has run the story. The comments section fills with workers from the Grandview Hotel sharing their own stories. One waitress describes how Douglas Hale touched her without permission. Another recalls him stealing her first tip of the night, leaving her unable to buy groceries. The narrative spreads like fire through dry wood. Luca, watching from across the street in an unmarked car, texts Giovanni, the rat is caged. Giovanni does not respond. He is with Aria. They are in Emma's hospital room, and Emma is drawing a new picture. This one shows 3 figures. A man. A woman. A child. All holding hands. All smiling. All together. Cordelia Blackwood's destruction comes 48 hours later. Wednesday morning arrives with steel-grey skies and the promise of more rain. Cordelia prepares for the Children's Hospital charity brunch, an event she has chaired for 12 years. She wears a dress that cost $6,000, purchased with money stolen from sick children. Her hair is professionally styled. Her jewelry is platinum and diamonds. She is the picture of Boston high society, elegant, powerful, untouchable. She arrives at the Four Seasons at 9 in the morning. She is greeted by doormen and ushers and members of the charity board who bow slightly at her presence. She is a queen in this world of privilege and philanthropy and donated money. FBI agents wait in the lobby. 12 of them. Men and women in dark suits with badges on their belts and zero tolerance in their expressions. Cordelia Blackwood, you are under arrest for embezzlement of charitable funds, wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The words hang in the air like a death sentence. The dining room falls silent. 300 members of Boston's elite stop mid-conversation and turn to watch. 20 news cameras crowd the lobby, equipment raised, capturing every second. Cordelia's face drains of color. This is a mistake. I have donated more money than anyone here. My lawyer, I demand to speak to my lawyer. This is impossible. Do you understand who I am? The agents do not care who she is. They do not care about her reputation or her charity board seat or her social standing. They place handcuffs on her wrists. The metal is cold. The handcuffs are identical to the ones they placed on Douglas Hale 2 days ago. The evidence is damning. $200,000 stolen from sick children. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands established under false names. Forged donation receipts. Inflated tax write-offs. 12 years of systematic theft covered by a veneer of philanthropy. She screams about her reputation. She screams about her lawyer. She screams that this is happening to the wrong person. The cameras capture every word, every tear, every moment of her unraveling. By evening, every news outlet in the country is running the story. Cordelia Blackwood, the charity queen, exposed as a thief. Sergio, posing as a waiter in the Four Seasons that morning, sets down a glass of water at her table that she will never drink and walks away into the kitchen, his work complete. That evening, Giovanni brings Aria to the underground poker room where everything began. The room where she has never been, the place where power lives and breathes and makes decisions that change the city. Cigar smoke hangs in the air like fog over a graveyard. Green felt tables gleam under amber lights. Whiskey glasses reflect the glow. Armed guards stand at every door, their eyes tracking every movement, every breath. Aria walks through this world of power and violence with her head held high. She is no longer the desperate woman from Route 128. She wears a simple black dress that fits her properly. Her red hair is clean and brushed. Her eyes are clear. Giovanni shows her the news coverage on multiple screens mounted on the walls. Douglas Hale faces federal prison, 40 years minimum. Cordelia Blackwood's assets are frozen. Every penny she stole is being traced and documented. Her maximum sentence is 60 years. She will be 75 years old before she sees daylight again. Justice, Giovanni says quietly, standing beside her. Not death. Too quick, too easy, too merciful. They will spend decades in cells, forgotten, powerless, everything they used against you, taken away from them in equal measure. Aria watches the screens. Douglas Hale weeping in his orange jumpsuit. Cordelia Blackwood's mugshot broadcast on every channel. She should feel triumph. Instead, she feels relief, the kind of relief that washes away the weight she has carried for so long that she forgot what it felt like to breathe freely. You did this for me, she says. Giovanni shakes his head. I created the opportunity. The FBI did their job. These people destroyed themselves with greed. I simply made sure the evidence reached the right hands at the right moment. The system worked exactly as it should have. He steps closer. The room falls away. There are only two people here now, in this space where men make decisions that echo through a city. You asked why I help you. The truth is you helped me first. That night on Route 128, I had just executed my own brother. I was covered in his blood. I thought I was a monster beyond redemption. Then you offered me shelter without knowing who I was, what I had done. You reminded me that mercy still exists. That some people see suffering and move toward it instead of away. Aria meets his eyes. His gaze is intense, dark, penetrating, the gaze of a man who has seen the worst that humanity offers and still chose to see the best in a stranger. I'm still the girl from the shelter, she says quietly. And I'm still the man who executed his own blood, Giovanni replies. His voice is rough with emotion. We're both exactly who we've always been. The question is not whether you can stand beside me. The question is whether you want to. Before she can answer, his phone buzzes. Luca appears in the doorway, his expression urgent, his posture tense. Boss, Luca says. We have a problem. The words hang in the air like the beginning of something new, something she did not see coming, something that will test everything she has just started to believe about her future. Giovanni's hand reaches for hers. His grip is warm, solid, certain. Whatever it is, he says without looking away from her, we face it together. The poker room falls silent. 18 months have passed since that October night on Route 128, since the convoy pulled alongside a broken sedan, since a bleeding man found shelter beneath a stranger's umbrella. Aria Reynolds stands at the edge of green felt and cigar smoke, watching Giovanni Valenti conduct business with the same controlled precision he uses to break empires. His men flank him, Sergio to his left, Luca to his right, both ancient in their loyalty. When Giovanni sees her, something shifts. His expression softens in a way that has never happened before, a way that ripples through the room like a stone dropped into still water. She walks toward him through the smoke. The guards part like she commands armies. In a way, she does now. She manages $40 million in legitimate holdings across Boston, real estate portfolios, community investment funds, legal operations that still move money through the city but through channels that answer to governments instead of guns. She earns $85,000 a year and answers to no one but herself and the man she is about to speak to. Aria places something on the green felt table. The room goes absolutely still. Tiny baby shoes. Size 1. Worn fabric. Yellowed laces. She has carried them for 12 years, since she was 19 years old and lived in a women's shelter with a newborn in her arms, a daughter she could not afford to keep, a choice that carved permanent grooves into her soul. I've carried these since I was 19, Aria says. Her voice is steady, shaped by months of learning to own her own power. A reminder of what I lost. What I survived. Why I keep fighting. She pauses. The cigar smoke hangs suspended in the silence. You told me months ago that you wanted me to stand as an equal. Not as the desperate woman you saved. Not as the girl with $5 in her pocket standing on a highway in October cold. You wanted someone who could stand beside you with their own strength, their own choices, their own foundation. Giovanni watches the shoes. His jaw tightens like he understands their weight without needing explanation. I rebuilt my life, Aria continues. I have my own apartment with bay windows and a kitchen bigger than a foreclosure notice. I have money I earned. I have choices I made. I have power I built myself. She picks up the shoes from the felt. But I'm still me. Still the woman who would give her last umbrella to a stranger. Still the girl who lived in a shelter and remembers what it costs to have nothing. If you want someone beside you, really beside you, you get all of it. The broken parts and the strong parts. The scars and the survival. Can you stand beside someone like me? Giovanni stands. His movement is deliberate, final, a decision being made in real time. His men watch in pure shock. In 15 years of loyalty, of violence, of building an empire together, they have never seen their boss do this. They have never seen vulnerability arranged like an offering on his face. Aria Reynolds, he says quietly. The use of her full name carries weight like a blade. You're the only person who ever offered me something without wanting anything in return. You're the only one who sees me and doesn't flinch. He pauses. His voice grows rougher. When I was covered in my own brother's blood, I thought I was a monster beyond redemption. You offered me your shelter. Your broken umbrella. Your kindness. And tonight, standing here in front of my entire organization, I'm asking, can you stand beside a man with blood on his hands? Aria steps closer. Her breath is steady. Her eyes do not look away. You had to choose between mercy and survival. You chose survival. I understand that choice because I've made it too. She takes his hand, the hand that executed his brother, that built an empire from blood and loyalty, that left envelopes of cash at her door when she had nothing. We're both survivors. Maybe that's exactly enough. The room erupts in whispers. Sergio and Luca exchange glances that hold pure shock. Their boss, the man who shows no weakness, stands there with tears in his eyes holding the hand of a former nanny who slept in a car and counted pennies like prayer beads. Giovanni pulls her close. The guards look away instinctively, granting privacy to something they have never witnessed before. In this moment, surrounded by violence and power and empire, they are just two people who found each other on a dark highway when everything was ending and something new began. 3 months pass. Aria stands in her back bay apartment watching sunset paint the city in shades of amber and rose. The foreclosure notice hangs framed on her wall, a reminder of rock bottom, of the moment she had $5 and 3 days before losing everything. Beside it, the tiny baby shoes rest in a shadow box, preserved like a prayer answered in retrograde. Emma visits every Saturday. She is 8 now, thriving, no longer haunted by Cordelia's neglect. Her father actually shows up, holding her hand as they climb the stairs. Cordelia Blackwood is in year 2 of a 35-year sentence. The embezzlement trial destroyed her completely. Every charity dollar she claimed to donate, every sick child she used for photographs, every foundation built on stolen money, all of it exposed like the rotting interior of a beautiful building. Her estate was liquidated. She owns nothing. In prison, she is nobody. Exactly what she called Aria. Douglas Hale will spend 38 years in a maximum security federal facility. The judge called him a predator who exploited the vulnerable. No one visits. No one writes. The city has moved forward without him, as if he never existed at all. Giovanni enters the apartment carrying take-out containers, Italian from the North End, Korean from Alston. A fusion like them, built from different origins, different codes, different languages, somehow translating into something neither expected. They eat together most nights now. He sets the containers on the kitchen counter and sees her looking at the framed foreclosure notice. "Why keep it?" he asks. Aria turns to face him. "Because it reminds me that rock bottom is where I found my foundation. I had $5 in my pocket, a broken umbrella, and nothing left to lose. That's when I met you." Giovanni sets down the containers and wraps his arms around her from behind, watching the city lights flicker on one by one, a constellation being born. "I had just killed my brother and lost my faith in mercy," he says into her hair. "That's when I met you." They stand there in silence. Aria remembers that October night with the precision of trauma, the dry cold cutting like glass, the convoy of black SUVs pulling behind her broken sedan, the bleeding man emerging from darkness, the moment she offered him shelter without knowing who he was. She remembers thinking that mercy was the only currency she had left. "Do you ever regret it?" she asks. "Helping me that first night?" Giovanni turns her to face him. His eyes are intense, dark, penetrating. "Regret? Aria, you saved my life before I ever saved yours. You reminded me that mercy exists. You brought me back from becoming the monster I feared I was." His voice roughens with emotion. Emma collapsed because Cordelia neglected her medications. You saved that child while everyone else froze. You acted when the most powerful people in the room stood paralyzed. That's who you are, someone who moves when others freeze. How could I regret finding you? Aria kisses him, this dangerous man who kneels for her alone, who holds her hand in rooms filled with guns, who learned mercy from a woman counting coins in a broken car. They eat dinner on the kitchen floor like they did in the beginning, before the apartment, before the titles, when it was just two broken people learning to trust again. The containers sit open between them. Rain begins to fall outside, tapping against the windows like 1,000 fingers asking for entry. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. A $5 bill and a broken umbrella. A bleeding stranger and a desperate woman. An act of mercy when mercy seemed impossible. That is how empires kneel, not to violence, but to kindness given when you have nothing left to give. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to remember that their lowest moment might be the beginning of everything. Subscribe because tomorrow we have another story about the moment everything changes. Comment below, have you ever helped a stranger and had it change your life? I read every single one of your comments. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that mercy matters. See you in the next story.